This is Michael Beers, West Coast editor for Jam Magazine, and I'm here with the multi-talented Simon Phillips, drummer, composer, producer, and audio engineer. Simon, thank you for the interview, and how are you today, sir?
I'm fine.
Great. Well, here's get started. Let's talk about the present and the future. Right now, with Protocol 5, you guys, this nucleus has been together for 3-4 years. And next week will mark the 2nd year anniversary of the release of the Protocol 5 album. The question what people are wanting to know, when will the next album be coming out, or will there be a next Protocol album? And would it be Protocol 5 Part 2, or will it be encompassing new musicians? And will there be a tour to go alongside with said next album coming out?
You know, I just haven't had any time to devote to my to new music, writing new music, because I've been involved with so many other productions, which I'm involved as a writer as well as producer and an engineer sometimes and player sometimes. So I just haven't had a chance to do it. But also, I need to take a little bit of time between projects, because I just don't want to repeat myself. Because the music is, you get into a way of writing and then it becomes kind of a formula a little bit. And I don't want to just do a revamp of Protocol 5. Protocol 5 is very different to Protocol 4. To my ears, maybe to people that don't know fusion might sound exactly the same, I don't know. But to me, it was very different. And that's not just the sound of the band, because now it's a 5-piece with a horn player. It's also the compositions themselves were really quite different. So I actually have to let a bit of time pass before I start on the writing trail. But I have a feeling I'm probably going to write more this year.
Great. Okay, speaking of producing, you've been on record. You started producing when you started working with Mike Oldfield, I believe it's the Crisis album, yeah. And then you produced, quite a few after that, and full-time producer as well. But the fact is, before Mike Oldfield, you worked with some extraordinary producers. I think of Ken Scott with There and Back with Jeff Beck. Yeah. Additionally, Frank Zappa, aka Stucco Holmes, for El Shankur's Touch Me There.
Right.
And then also you did 2 albums with Roger Glover. You did Judas Priest, Sin After Sin, as well as the MSG, Michael Schenker Group, the first album.
Well, and David Coverdale, Whitesnake.
Okay, there you go too. Thank you so much for reminding me. Right.
Yeah.
So my question is this though: aside from what you learned from Mike Oldfield, were you able to assimilate, maybe through osmosis, subtle nuances of being a producer from working with those people that helped, contributed to you being such an effective producer?
Actually, every session I did was a learning curve. I mean, early on, I started doing sessions with my dad in 1971. I was really young, but that was a very specific type of music which I knew quite well. And apart from new charts he'd bring out, I pretty much knew what the music was going to be. But in 1973 was when I started actually being booked for a session and turning out not knowing what I was going to play, or whether it be a chart or whether it be, And they started off as small sessions with unknown producers. But as I was 16 at the time, all of them were way more experienced than I was. So I was in a learning position the whole time. I got to work with some great producers, totally unknown to certainly the American public. But they were either producers of some pop artists, like we used to do a lot of sessions for Dave Mackay. I think it was Dave Mackay, who produced Bonnie Tyler, for example, way before Jim Steinman got hold of her. And all sorts of different types of music and different types of producers. Colin Thurston, who produced Human League, worked with him on various projects. So all that time I was gaining experience. But you see, I grew up in the studio. I was dragged around the London studios by my dad. And so the environment to me it's home. I feel most comfortable actually in a studio.
Great. I mentioned the album Sin After Sin by Judas Priest. That was sort of like a milestone moment in rock as far as you using the double bass drums? Because prior to that, I mean, back in the early 70s, there's just a handful of drummers that used double bass drums.
Yeah.
And anyway, then you started doing that. So my question is, at what age did you start using your double bass drums? And also, when you were using them, were you a specific genre of music? Were you thinking, well, this will go good with jazz, or this will go good with rock? Did you have a certain type of music? So how did it come about with your double bass?
I was 17, 1974. I bought a second bass drum to go with my Midnight Blue Heyman kit. I'll tell you what it was. I was always fascinated by it. I was also fascinated by reading the Ludwig catalog or Slingerland catalog or whatever it be, Heyman catalog, Premiere. I always thought, God, what is that like? And I saw a few people play double bass drum on various TV shows, and it wasn't what I thought it should be until I watched an All Grey Whistle Test, which was a wonderful program back in England, in BBC Two, I think it was. And I saw Black Oak, Arkansas, and Tommy Aldrich playing these two 26-inch Ludwig bass drums. Well, I think they were 20. They looked huge. I was watching television, and that was the first time I went, yes, that's how they should sound, because he was so even. Every foot was even. The gaps between the 16th notes were even, and that's when I said, I've got to do this.
Great.
But I never thought of a style of music. No, not at all. I just would, depending on the session, if it were what I call the straight sessions, which was like 3-hour sessions, 10 to 1 at Air Studio 2, 2 to 5 at CBS, and then maybe 7 till 10 sometimes. Then I would probably use my single Ludwig kit at the time. But then I started doing more of the rock and roll sessions where we had a lot more time. I brought my double kit in. Even if I didn't use the second kick drum, it didn't really matter to me. And I would use it how and when I felt it was appropriate. That's really kind of how it was.
The other album I was going to ask you about was There and Back with Jeff Beck. The first half of the album, Jan Hammer wrote all the tracks, but the other half, you and Tony Hymas wrote the tracks, and most notably, you had like The Pump, El Becco, and Space Boogie, which live were some of the highlights of that tour.
Yeah.
Was this the first opportunity you had to showcase your writing skills, to show that you could write? And also, did you and Tony, working with Jack Bruce together, were these ideas that you had formulated and maybe applied with Jeff Beck, or you just pulled them out just made them out of scratch, just pulled them out of the hat?
I had been starting to play a bit of piano and starting to write things from, I'd say 74 probably. But unfortunately, I never went to school. I never went to music school, because in London at that time, we didn't have any. We just had the Royal College of Music. There were no jazz schools, there were no rock and roll schools. And the other thing was, I was already working. And the thought of stopping work and then going to Berkeley, I didn't even know about Berkeley, by the way, at that time. It was 1974, 75. My schooling was actually practical schooling, because I turn up to a session and play with the people I'm playing with, and that's how I learned how to do this. So sadly, the downside is that I have no idea of music theory at all. It's all ear. I do it all by ear. I don't know what key I'm writing in. I don't really care, actually. I'll let those guys, I'm the drummer, musicians. Musicians are very good at doing that. And also, it was funny because the people that I was playing with a lot, like Ray Russell, who I was in a band with, we did lots of sessions together, and Tony, they were my two main guiding lights. They just said, just do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Especially Ray. He said, no, it's wonderful that you actually don't have the confines of this education of music. And I feel I lost out a lot. But anyway, I started doing that. But it was really when we got to Jeff's album that I thought, we need material. And I also had I thought I had a real kinship for what Jeff needed. because I knew that he didn't like anything too jazzy, but he loved what I call adult chords. He loved jazz harmony, but he wanted it to be very melodic and still rock and roll. And I think that's what a lot of people don't quite understand about him. There's this thing about, he really wasn't a jazz guy at all, but he had the ears and the technique to play over any of those changes. It was amazing. So, and Jan probably was the closest person in terms of getting more, had a heavier rock side to him, because that's what he wanted to do. He always wanted to be a rock and roll musician, you know. Tony Williams too, actually, he always wanted to play in a rock band. And his last drum kit had 2 bass drums. I don't know if you know that. So that was where it started, and I said to Tony, let's get together. And so he's I'm not going to mess around with harmony. He's got all the harmony because he's got all the chops.
Yeah.
But what I did was more melody and concept. I came up with the concepts of each of those songs.
Yeah.
I might have a little bass riff that I had, which on El Becco, that started there actually. Tony wrote the whole beginning. He'd already had that, and he played it to me, and I went, great, that's going to go great into the do 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 do. I was just do 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 bling bling do do. I was trying to be like do a Stanley Clarke thing, and he picked that up, and that's how that came to be. The Pump was based on I'm a Walrus, Beatles, and I said, Tony, here's the groove, and just one note. Just, pick a note, pick a key, and you pick B, so boom, 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 like this, and that's how that came about. And we both worked on the melody, and Space Boogie was an accident. We were jamming, Jeff, Tony, and I took a little drum kit down there, so it was a single kit. And we played some of these tunes through, and then had a break. And I got a bit bored, so I dragged over the bass drum from Jeff's kit into this little Premiere kit and plonked it. And so I had 2 bass drums, and we just started playing like a quadrant 4 boogie, right? Mm-hmm. I just started turning it around by playing in 7 against the 4, and Jeff picked up on it and started playing in 7. And I went to Tony. There's our next song, and that's how it came about. But yes, you're right. That was really the first time I felt that's the music I want to write. Hello there, I'm Simon Phillips, and you heard it on Jam Magazine.